Monday, 15th of June, 1914. Bradgate, Kent. Got the Grifton Hotel. Sunrise? A pink and blue June morning found me at Bradgate, looking from the Griffin Hotel over a smooth sea. The lightship on the Cock Sands seemed the size of a bellboy. A couple of miles further south and much nearer the shore was a small destroyer was anchored. Lightship on the Cock Sands seemed the size of a bellboy, okay. Scarf had been in the Navy and knew the boat. He told me her name and her commanders, so I sent off a wire to Sir Walter. After breakfast, Scarf got from our house agent a key for the gates of the staircase on the Ruff. I walked with him along the sands and sat down in a nook of the cliffs while he investigated the half dozen of them. I didn't want to be seen, but the place at this hour was quite deserted, and all the time I was on that beach I saw nothing but the seagulls. It took him more than an hour to do the job. Everything depending on my guess proving right. He read aloud the numbers of steps on the different staircase.
34, 35, 42, 47, and 21, where the cliffs get lower. Oh, and 39.
Scaife, we have them.
We hurried back to the town and sent a wire to McGilvery. I wanted half a dozen men, and I directed them to divide themselves among different specified hotels. And Scaife set out to prospect the house at the head of the 39 steps. He came back with news that both puzzled and reassured me. Scaife's report. The house. The house was called Trafalgar Lodge and belonged to an old gentleman called Appleton, a retired stockbroker, the house agent said. Only 3 servants were kept, a cook, a parlourmaid and a housemaid. The cook was not the gossiping kind and had pretty soon shut the door in his face, but Scaife said he was positive she knew nothing. The occupants. They were just the sort of you would find in a respectable middle-class household. Mr. Appleton was there a good deal in the summertime and was a resident now. Had been for the better part of a week. Scaife could pick up very little information about him, except that he was a decent old fellow who paid his bills regularly and was always good for a fiver for the local charity. Neighbours. Next door was a new house building, which would give good cover for observation, and the villa on the other side was to let, and its garden was rough and shrubby. I borrowed Scaife's telescope, and before lunch went for a walk along the Ruff. I kept well behind the rows of villas and found a good observation point on the edge of the golf course. 39 steps. I observed someone leave the house and saunter along the cliff. I saw it was an old man, wearing white flannel trousers, a blue serge jacket and a straw hat. He carried field glasses and a newspaper. He sat down on one of the iron seats and began to read. Sometimes he would lay down the paper and turn his glasses on the sea. He looked for a long time at the destroyer. I watched the elderly man for half an hour, till he got up and went back to the house for his luncheon, when I returned to the hotel from mine. This decent commonplace dwelling was not what I had expected. The man might have been bold archaeologist of the horrible moorland farm, or he might not. He was exactly the kind of satisfied old bird you will find in every suburb and every holiday place. If you wanted a type of perfectly harmless person, you would probably pitch on that. After lunch, I perked up, for I saw the thing that I had been hoped for and dreaded to miss. Her name was the Ariadne. Scarf said she was a fast boat for her build, and that it was pretty heavily engineered. Scarf and I went down to the harbour and hired a boatman for the afternoon's fishing. About 4 o'clock I made the boatman row us around the yacht, which lay like a delicate white bird ready for at a moment to flee. One of the men was polishing the brasswork. I spoke to him and got an answer in the softest dialect of Essex. Another hand that came along passed me the time of day in an unmistakable English tongue. Our boatman had an argument with one of them about the weather, and for a few minutes we lay on our oars close to the starboard bow. Then the men suddenly disregarded us and bent their heads to their work as an officer came along the deck. He was a pleasant, clean-looking young fellow, and he put a question to us about our fishing in very good English. But there was no doubt about him. His close-cropped head and the cut of his collar and tie never came out of England. I know the Germans. In the hotel I met the commander of the destroyer, to whom Scaife had introduced me, and with whom I had a few words. Then I thought I would put in an hour or two watching Trafalgar Lodge. Trafalgar Lodge, tennis. They played with tremendous zest, like two city gents who wanted the hard exercise to open their pores. They shouted and laughed and stopped for drinks, when a maid brought out 2 tankards on the salver. Impostors. You couldn't conceive a more innocent spectacle. I rubbed my eyes and asked myself if I had not the most immortal fool on earth. Mystery and darkness has hung around the men who hunted me over the Scotch moor, and in aeroplane and motor car, and notably about the infernal antiquarian. It was easy enough to connect these folks with a knife that pinned Scudder to the floor, and with fell designs on the world's peace, but here were 2 guileless citizens taking their innocuous exercise, and soon about to go indoors for a humdrum dinner, where they would talk of market prices and the last cricket scores. Suspicions. The thing that worried me was the reflection that my enemies knew that I had got my knowledge from Scudder, and that it was Scudder who had given me the clue to this place. If they knew that Scudder had this clue, would they not be certain to change their plans? I had talked confidently last night about Germans always sticking to a scheme, but if they had suspicions that I was on their track, they would be fools not to cover it. I had been making a net to catch vultures and falcons, and lo and behold, 2 plum thrushes had blundered into it. Presently a third figure arrived, a young man on a bicycle. He was welcomed riotously by the players.
You all right there, Percy?
Yes, you're looking a little hot under the collar.
I've got into a proper lather. This'll bring down my weight and my handicap, Bob. I'll take you on tomorrow and give you a stroke a hole.
They all went into the house and left me feeling a precious idiot. I would rather have walked into the den of anarchists, each with the Browning handy, or faced a charging lion with a pop gun, than enter a happy home with 3 cheerful Englishmen and tell them that their game was up. But then I remembered old Peter Pena. He was the best scout I ever knew, and before he had turned respectable he had been pretty often on the winding side of the law. Peter once discussed with me the question of disguises, and he had a theory which struck me at the time. He said, barring absolute certainties like fingerprints, mere physical traits were very little of use for identification if the fugitive really knew his business. The only thing that mattered was that Peter called atmosphere. Those chaps didn't need to act, they just turned a handle and passed into another life, which came so naturally to them as the first. Peter used to say that it was the big secret of all the famous criminals. His recollection gave me the first real comfort that I had had that day. Peter had been wise old bird, and these fellows I was after were about to pick of the aviary. It was now getting on for 8 o'clock, and I went back to Sir Scaife to give him his instructions. I arranged with him how to place his men, and then I went for a walk, for I didn't feel up to any dinner. I took all my resolution to stroll towards Trafalgar Lodge. On the way I got a piece of solid comfort from the sight of a greyhound that was swinging along at the nursemaid's heels. He reminded me of a dog I used to have in Rhodesia. Monday, 15th of June 1914, Bradgate, Kent. Welcome back everyone to the 39 Steps. I arrived once again at Trafalgar Lodge. Scaife's men would be posted by now, but there was no sign of a soul.
Is, Mr. Appleton at home?
Yes, sir. Please come in.
My plan had been to walk straight into the dining room, and by a sudden appearance wake in the men that start of recognition which would confirm my theory. But when I found myself in that neat hall, the place mastered me.
Who may I say is calling?
Richard Hannay.
If you could wait in the smoking room, I'll let Mr. Appleton know you're here.
Realizing my mistake, I pulled myself together and ran after the maid. But I was too late.
Mr. Hannay? Did you wish to see me?
I think we have met before, and I guess you know my business.
The light of the room was a little dim, but so far as I could see their faces, they played the part of mystification very well.
Maybe. I haven't a very good memory, but I'm afraid you must tell me your errand, sir, for I really don't know it.
Well then, I have come to tell you that the game's up.
All the time I seemed to myself to be talking pure foolishness.
I have a warrant for the arrest of you three gentlemen.
Arrest? Arrest? Good God, what for?
He looked really shocked.
For the murder of Franklin Scudder in London on the 23rd day of last month.
I never heard the name before.
That was the Portland Place murder. I read about it. Good heavens. You must be mad, sir. Where do you come from?
Scotland Yard.
Though I hadn't an ounce of confidence in me, I forced myself to play the game.
Don't get flustered, Uncle. It's all a ridiculous mistake. But these things happen sometimes, and we can easily set it right. It won't be hard to prove our innocence. I can show you that I was out the country on the 23rd of May, and Bob was in a nursing home. You were in London, but you can explain what you were doing.
Right, Percy. Of course, that's easy enough. The 23rd. That was the day after Agatha's wedding. Let me see, what was I doing? Came up in the morning from Woking and lunched at the club with Charlie Simons. Then, oh yes, I dined with the fishmongers. I remember, for the punch didn't agree with me and I was seedy next morning. Hang it all, there's the cigar box I brought back from the dinner.
After that, for a minute there was utter silence. The old man was staring at his plate and fumbling with a nut, the very model of innocent bewilderment.
I think, sir, you will see you are mistaken. We want to assist the law like all Englishmen, and we don't want Scotland Yard to be making fools of themselves. That so, Uncle?
Certainly, Bob.
The old fellow seemed to be recovering his voice.
Certainly. We'll do anything in our power to assist the authorities, but this is a bit too much. I can't get over it.
How Nellie will chuckle. She always said you would die of boredom because nothing ever happened to you. Now you've got it thick and strong.
It couldn't be acting. It was too confoundedly genuine.
By Joe, yes, just think of it. What a story to tell at the club. Really, Mr. Hannay, I suppose I should be angry to show my innocence, but it's too funny. I almost forgive you the fright you gave me. You looked so glum. I thought I might have been walking in my sleep and killing people.
To cover my confusion, I got up, walked to the door, and switched on the electric light. The sudden glare made them blink, and I stood scanning the three faces. I made nothing of it. One of them was old and bald, one was stout, one was dark and thin. They seemed exactly what they professed to be, and I could not have sworn to one of them. I could see nothing to connect them with the moorland desperadoes.
Well, are you reassured by your scrutiny, sir?
I couldn't find a word.
I hope you find it consistent with your duty to drop this ridiculous business. I make no complaint, but you see how annoying it must be to respectable people.
I shook my head.
Oh, Lord. This is a bit too thick.
Do you propose to march us off to the police station? That might be the best way out of it, but I suppose you won't be content with the local branch. I have the right to ask to see your warrant, but I don't wish to cast any aspersions upon you. You're only doing your duty. But you'll admit, it's horribly awkward. What do you propose to do?
For a moment I was very near damning myself for the fool and asking their pardon.
Meantime, I vote we have a game of bridge. It'll give Mr. Hannay time to think over things. And you know we've been wanting a fourth player. Do you play, sir?
I accepted, as if I had been ordinary invitation at the club.
Yes. Yes, I play.
I felt mesmerised by the whole place, by the air of obvious innocence. Not innocence merely, but frank honest bewilderment and concern in their three faces. We went into the smoking room where the card table was set out, and I was offered things to smoke and drink. The three were talking easily. Just the kind of slangy talk you will hear in any golf clubhouse. I must have cut a rum figure, sitting there knitting my brows with my eyes wandering. My partner was the young dark one. I play a fair hand at bridge, but I must have been ranked bad that night. They saw that they had got me puzzled, and that put them more than ever at their ease. I kept looking at their faces, but they conveyed nothing to me. It is not that they looked different, but they were different. I clung desperately to the words of Peter Pienaar. Then it happened. It was the movement I remembered when I had stood before him in the moorland farm, with the pistols of his servants behind me. Some shadow lifted from my brain, and I was looking at the three men with full and absolute recognition. Bob. The dark, lean man. He was the murderer. Now I saw cruelty and ruthlessness, where before I had only seen good humour. His knife had skewered Scudder to the floor, and his kind had put the bullets in Karolides. Percy. The plump man's features seemed to dislimn and form again as I looked at them. He hadn't a face, only 100 masks that he could assume when he was pleased. That chap must have been a superb actor. Perhaps he had been Lord Alloa of the night before, perhaps not, it didn't matter. I wonder if he was the fellow that first tracked Scudder and left his card on him. Scudder had said he lisped, and I could imagine the adoption of a lisp might add terror. Appleton. He was the pick of the lot. He was sheer brain, icy cool, calculating, as ruthless as a steam hammer. Now that my eyes were open, I wondered where I had seen the benevolence. His jaw was like chilled steel, and his eyes had the inhuman luminosity of a bird. I went on playing, and every second a greater hate welled up in my heart.
Bob, look at the time. You better think about catching your train. Bob's got to go to town tonight.
The voice rang now, as false as hell. I looked at the clock, and it was nearly 10:30.
I'm afraid he must put off his journey.
Oh, damn. I thought you'd dropped that rot. I simply got to go. You can have my address, and I'll give you any security you like.
No, you must stay.
I'll go bail for my nephew. That ought to content you, Mr. Hannay.
As I glanced at him, his eyelids fell in that hawk-like hood which fear had stamped on my memory. A pair of strong arms gripped me around the waist, covering the pockets in which the man might expect to carry a pistol.
Get your hands off me! Schnell, Franz! Das Boot! Das Boot!
I grappled the old man, and the room seemed to fill with figures. I saw the plump one collared, but my eyes were all for the out of doors, where Franz sped on over the road towards the railed entrance to the beach stairs. One man followed him, but he had no chance. I stood staring with my hands on the old boy's throat for such a time as a man might take to descend those steps to the sea. Suddenly my prisoner broke from me and flung himself on the wall. The stairway had been completely destroyed.
He is safe. You cannot follow in time. He's gone. He has triumphed. Der schwarze Stein ist in der Siegeskrone.
There was more than those eyes that had any common triumph. They had been hooded like a bird of prey, and now they flamed with a hawk's pride. This man was more than a spy. In his foul way, he had been a patriot. As the handcuffs clinked on their wrist, I said my last words to him.
I hope Franz will bear his triumph well. I ought to tell you that the Ariadne for the last hour has been in our hands.
The end. There we have it, the 39 steps. Different ending to that I know from the movie, but still, fantastic story of the manhunt. Probably the first real manhunt story, as they say, also influenced Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's writing of Sherlock Holmes. So a fantastic story. I urge you all to read it or watch the movies if you can't be bothered. Fantastic movies, there's a number of them out there. I always like the Robert Powell version. That's my preference, but I'll leave it with you to make that decision. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the 39 steps. A new series will be starting very soon. Something completely different once again, so keep that in mind. Take care, and I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Company! Dismiss!
3 weeks later, as all the world knows, we went to war. I joined the new army the first week and, owing to my Matabele experience, got a captain's commission straight off. But I had done my best service, I think, before I put on khaki.